Welcome, dear listener. I'm so glad you're here with me tonight. Before we begin our journey together, I want you to find your most comfortable position. Perhaps you're nestled under soft blankets, your head cradled by a pillow that's just right. Maybe you're in your favorite chair with the world quiet around you. Wherever you are, you're exactly where you need to be. Let's take a moment together to let go of the day that's passed. All those tasks, those conversations, those small worries, we're going to set them aside now, just for this time. They'll be there if you need them tomorrow, but right now, this moment is yours. I'd like to guide you through some gentle breaths. Breathing that will help your body remember how to rest, how to soften, how to simply be. Let's begin. Breathe in slowly through your nose. 2, 3, 4. Feel the cool air fill your lungs, your chest expanding gently. Hold it there for just a moment. 1, 2. And now, release it slowly through your mouth. 2, 3, 4. Let it all go like a gentle sigh. Beautiful. Let's do that again. In through your nose. 2, 3, 4. You're breathing in peace, in calm, in this quiet moment. Hold. 1, 2, and out through your mouth. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Feel your shoulders drop just a little. Feel the tension leaving. Let your jaw relax. Let your hands unfold. Let your whole body become just a little bit heavier, sinking into comfort. Perfect. You're doing beautifully. Now, with your body settling into rest, let me tell you where we're going tonight. In a narrow street in the old quarter of Bath, there's a small cafe that most people pass without noticing. It's called the Lavender Café, and it's been serving tea and quiet conversation for nearly 100 years. The paint on its sign is weathered to a soft purple gray, and inside, mismatched teacups line shelves above tables worn smooth by decades of elbows and afternoon conversations. But something peculiar has been happening at the Lavender Café. Customers have been finding little notes tucked into their teacups. Notes written in elegant handwriting on aged paper. Notes that seem to know things they shouldn't. Notes that whisper of a story waiting to be discovered. Tonight, we follow Iris Hartley, a conservator of rare documents who's just moved to Bath to catalog a private collection. She's someone who loves puzzles, who finds poetry in old paper and meaning in faded ink. When she discovers one of these mysterious notes in her morning tea, she can't help but wonder, who's leaving them and why? There will be gentle sleuthing through the cafe's history, conversations with its longtime patrons, the discovery of old letters and photographs tucked in unexpected places. We'll trace the edges of a love story that that began in wartime. Follow the trail of lavender sachets and pressed flowers, and piece together a mystery that's really an act of remembrance. This is a story of patience rewarded, of attention leading to understanding, of the past reaching gently toward the present with a message of hope. So settle just a little deeper now. Let the world outside this story fade to nothing, and let us begin. The rain had been falling on Bath since dawn, the kind of persistent English drizzle that turned the honey-colored stone buildings a shade darker and made the streets gleam like polished amber. Iris Hartley stood under the awning of the Lavender Café, shaking droplets from her umbrella before stepping inside. She walked past this cafe 3 times in the week since she'd moved to Bath, and each time, something about it had caught her eye. Perhaps it was the way the purple-painted window frames contrasted with the golden stone, or the handwritten menu visible through the rain-spotted glass, or simply the warm glow from within that promised refuge from the October weather. Today, she'd finally decided to go in. A small bell chimed as she opened the door, and the scent of bergamot and lavender enveloped her immediately. The cafe was small, no more than 8 tables, but every surface seemed deliberately, lovingly arranged. Teacups in patterns of roses, violets, and forget-me-nots lined shelves along one wall. Dried lavender bunches hung from exposed beams. A glass-fronted cabinet displayed cakes on vintage cake stands, and in the corner, an old gramophone played something soft and orchestral. "Sit anywhere you like, love," called a voice from behind the counter. A woman in her 60s, with silver hair pinned in a loose bun and reading glasses on a beaded chain, smiled at her. "I'll be right with you." Iris chose a table by the window where she could watch the rain trace patterns on the glass. She set down her leather satchel, the one that carried her conservation tools, her notebook, and whatever book she was currently reading, and settled into the mismatched chair. The table was covered with a linen cloth, embroidered at the corners with small purple flowers. The woman approached with a menu handwritten on thick cream cardstock. "You're new to the neighborhood," she observed kindly. "I'm Cecily. I've owned this place for 40 years, so I know most of the faces that come through that door. Just moved here last week," Iris said, returning the smile. "I'm Iris. I'm working on cataloging the Ashworth collection, the families finally donating their private library to the university." "Oh, how wonderful." Eleanor Ashworth was a dear friend. She'd have been so pleased to know her books would be properly cared for. Cecily's eyes had a faraway look for a moment. She used to come here every Thursday afternoon for tea. Always sat at that table over there. She gestured to a corner table near the fireplace. "What can I get you? What would you recommend?" The lavender Earl Grey is our specialty. And if you're hungry, the lemon cake is fresh this morning. Perfect. While Cecily prepared her order, Iris let her gaze wander around the cafe. Every detail spoke of careful curation, the accumulation of decades. Framed photographs hung on the walls, black and white images of Bath Street scenes from different eras. She recognized some of the buildings, though the fashions of the pedestrians dated the photos to various decades of the 20th century. One photograph in particular caught her attention. It showed the cafe itself, though the sign above the door read, "The Violet Tea Room," in elaborate script. A young woman stood in the doorway, wearing a 1940s-style dress and an apron, her dark hair victory-rolled, a slight smile on her face, as if the photographer had just said something amusing. "Here we are," Cecily said, returning with a tray. She set down a teapot covered with a quilted cozy, a cup and saucer with a delicate pattern of purple flowers, a small jug of milk, and a generous slice of cake on a gold-rimmed plate. "That photograph," Iris said, gesturing to the image. "Is that this cafe?" "It is indeed. That's my grandmother, Violet. She opened the place in 1928. It was called the Violet Tea Room then. My mother changed the name to the Lavender Café when she took over in the 60s. Thought it sounded more modern, though she kept everything else exactly as Gran had it. It's lovely. The whole place feels like stepping into another time." "That's the idea," Cecily said warmly. "We're rather committed to being anachronistic around here. Now, you let me know if you need anything else." She bustled away to greet another customer, and Iris poured her tea. The scent of bergamot mingled with something floral, lavender, of course, but also something else. Rose, perhaps. The first sip was perfect, aromatic, soothing, exactly what she needed on a rainy morning. She was halfway through her slice of cake, which was indeed excellent, tender and bright with lemon, when she noticed it. At the bottom of her teacup, just visible through the remaining tea, was something that didn't belong. She poured the last of the liquid into the saucer and looked inside. A small piece of paper, folded into a tiny square, lay at the bottom of the cup. Iris glanced around. The only other customers were an elderly man reading a newspaper by the fireplace, and a young couple sharing a pot of tea near the door. Cecily was in the back, doing something with dishes. No one was watching her. Carefully, she lifted the paper from the cup. It was damp, but intact, made of a thick, good quality stock that had resisted the tea's moisture. She unfolded it with the tips of her fingers, a conservator's habit, handling everything as if it might be fragile. The paper was cream-colored, with with a slight texture that suggested it was decades old, not modern printer paper. Written on it in dark blue ink, in a flowing, old-fashioned hand, were 4 lines, where lavender blooms in window boxes, and memories steep like afternoon tea. Look for the place where time keeps secrets, in the gap between what is and what used to be. Iris read it 3 times, her heart quickening with the particular thrill she always felt when encountering a puzzle. This was clearly deliberate. Someone had placed this note in her cup. But who and why? She looked at the handwriting more closely. The script was confident. The letters formed with the kind of penmanship that wasn't taught anymore. The ink had a slightly faded quality, as if it had been exposed to light for years. And the paper itself, she rubbed it gently between her fingers, felt like the mid-20th century stock she sometimes encountered in her conservation work. "How's everything?" Cecily appeared at her elbow, making her jump slightly. "Delicious," Iris said, "but I found something odd." She held up the note. "This was in my teacup." Cecily's expression shifted through several emotions in quick succession. Surprise, recognition, and something that looked almost like satisfaction. "Oh," she said softly, "you're one of them then." "One of whom?" "The ones who find the notes." Cecily pulled out the chair across from Iris and sat down, her eyes bright with interest. "It's been happening for about 3 weeks now. Customers finding little messages in their cups. Always different people, always different messages. And always on that same old paper, in that same handwriting. Do you know who's leaving them?" "Not a clue. At first, I thought someone was playing a prank, but," she gestured around the cafe, "I'm here from 6 in the morning until closing at 6 in the evening. I wash every cup myself. There's no way someone could be slipping notes into them without me seeing. Maybe it's happening during service, while cups are sitting at tables. That's what I thought too. So I've been watching. Hawks, I've been like. But I never see anyone doing anything suspicious. And yet," she sighed, 3, sometimes 4 times a week, someone comes up to me with a note they found in their cup." Iris felt the familiar tingle of a mystery presenting itself. This was exactly the kind of puzzle she loved, something that required attention, patience, and careful thought. "Have you kept any of the other notes?" "I have, actually. The first few people just left them on the table, so I collected them. Thought they might mean something. Would you like to see?" "Very much." Cecily disappeared into the back and returned a moment later with a small wooden box, the kind that might once have held tea or chocolates. She set it on the table and opened it. Inside were 9 small pieces of paper, all folded into neat squares. Counting yours. That makes 10, Cecily said. Iris carefully unfolded each one. Every note was written on the same kind of cream-colored paper, in the same elegant handwriting. Each contained a short verse or phrase, poetic and slightly cryptic. In the language of flowers, purple speaks of devotion. The clock in the square has forgotten 1 hour. Find it and find the beginning. She kept them all. Every letter, every pressed bloom. A life measured in small preservations, where steam once rose and goodbyes were whispered. Look for the bench that remembers. Tuesday was their day, when the market bloomed, and violets sold for a penny, a bunch. The photograph on the wall knows more than it shows. Look closer at what she holds. In the register of names from 1943, one appears twice, but was only one person. The recipe was never about cake. Between pages 47 and 48 of the guest book, something waits that was always meant to be found. Iris laid them all out on the table, arranging them like pieces of a puzzle. Her mind was already working, looking for patterns, connections. These aren't random, she said slowly. They're clues. Someone is creating a trail. But to what? Cecily leaned forward, studying the notes with renewed interest. I don't know yet, but they all seem to relate to this cafe, or at least to this area. The lavender, the flowers, the clock in the square, that must be the Abbey churchyard. And look at this one. She tapped the note about the photograph. It specifically mentions a photograph on the wall. May I? She stood and approached the wall of framed photos. There were perhaps 20 of them, in various sizes and frames. Most showed street scenes, but a few were portraits or group photos. She studied each one carefully, looking for someone holding something. There, she said after a moment, pointing to a photograph near the corner. It showed 3 young women in 1940s dress, standing outside what was clearly this cafe, though the sign read, the Violet Tea Room. The woman in the middle, the same one from the photo Cecily had pointed out earlier, held something small in her hands. Iris leaned closer, squinting at the faded image. That's my grandmother, Cecily said, coming to stand beside her. And those are her friends, I think. I never knew their names. Gran died before I was born. What's she holding? I'm not sure. I've looked at this picture 1,000 times and never really paid attention. Let me get it down. Cecily carefully lifted the frame from its hook and brought it to the table where the light was better. They both bent over it, examining the small object in Violet's hands. It's a book, Iris said finally. A small book or journal. See the edge. And there's something tucked in it, a bookmark, maybe, or a letter. Why would that be important? I don't know. But the note says the photograph knows more than it shows. Iris turned her attention to the frame itself. It was old, wooden, with a cardboard backing secured by bent metal tabs. May I open it? Go ahead. Iris carefully bent back the tabs and removed the backing. The photograph itself was mounted on cardboard, but behind it, folded and yellowed with age, was a piece of paper. Her hands were steady as she unfolded it. Decades of conservation work had taught her how to handle delicate documents. It was a letter, written in the same handwriting as the notes, but longer, more detailed. My dearest Cecily, Iris read aloud, then paused. Wait, Cecily, that's your name. It is, but it was my mother's name too. And Cecily's voice caught slightly. I think it might have been a family name before that. Gran might have had a sister or cousin named Cecily. I don't know much about her family. She never spoke of them. Iris continued reading. My dearest Cecily, if you're reading this, it means you've been paying attention, following the trail of breadcrumbs I've been leaving. Good. You were always the clever one, the one who noticed things. I'm writing this in the winter of 1943, and I don't know if I'll ever give it to you. The war has changed everything, made the future uncertain in ways we never imagined when we were girls planning our lives over tea and cake in that little cafe we loved. But I want you to know the truth about that autumn, about the choice I made, about why I disappeared. And if something happens to me, if I don't survive this war, I want you to have the whole story, not just the pieces you were able to gather. It begins, as so many stories do, with a meeting that seemed like nothing special at the time. Tuesday Market Day, September 1942. The lavender was in bloom. The letter ended there, mid-sentence, as if the writer had been interrupted or had decided to continue it elsewhere. This is incredible, Iris breathed. Someone, presumably your grandmother, wrote this 80 years ago. And now, someone else is leaving notes that led us to find it. But who and why now? Cecily's face was pale. My mother never mentioned anything like this. She never said Gran had secrets or mysteries or any of this. Iris gathered the notes carefully. These are clues to a larger story, and whoever's leaving them wants that story to be discovered. Look, this note mentions the Register of Names from 1943, and another one talks about the guest book. Do you have records going back that far? We have everything. Gran was meticulous about record keeping. My mother kept it all when she took over, and I've kept it too. Boxes and boxes in the storage room upstairs. Cecily stood abruptly, energized by purpose. "Let me put up the back in 10 minutes" sign. "I want to show you." The storage room above the cafe was exactly what Iris had hoped it would be. A treasure trove of preserved history, organized with care. Shelves lined 3 walls, filled with boxes labeled in neat handwriting. Receipts 1928-1935. Guest books 1936-19 for 5. Menus and suppliers. Photographs and miscellany. "My grandmother believed in writing things down," Cecily said, pulling a chain to turn on the overhead light. "My mother used to say Gran treated the cafe like it was going to be in a museum someday. Kept records of everything, what she served, who came in, what they ordered, even notes about the weather, and how it affected business." "A historian's dream," Iris murmured, already scanning the labels. "May I? Please, I have to admit, I've never gone through most of this properly. Always meant to, but running the cafe keeps me busy enough. I just keep adding to it. My own records go in that section over there." Iris pulled down the box labeled Guest Books 1930-619 for 5 and set it on the small table by the window. Inside were 3 leather-bound volumes, their covers worn soft with age. She opened the first one. The entries began in 1936, each page headed with a date. Below, in various hands, visitors had signed their names, sometimes adding comments. "Delightful scones," "A haven of peace," "Best tea in Bath." She found what she was looking for in the 3rd volume. 1943. "Look at this," she said, running her finger down the page for Tuesday, September 14, 1943. "Here's a name, James Fletcher. And here, just 3 entries below, also James Fletcher, but the handwriting is different. Could be 2 different people with the same name. Possibly, but the note said one appears twice, but was only one person." Iris compared the 2 signatures. The first was bold, confident, with a flourish under the surname. The second was the same name, but written in a more delicate hand, the same hand. She realized with a start, as the notes they'd found. "Someone signed his name for him," she said slowly. "Or he signed it, and then someone else signed it again, pretending to be him. But why? I don't know yet. Let's look at the other clues. The register of names. Would that be different from the guest book?" Cecily thought for a moment. Gran kept a separate register for regular customers, like a membership book. People who came in often could have their preferences noted, get a slight discount, that sort of thing. I still have those. She pulled down another box, this one labeled Customer Register 1941-945. The register was a large ledger with ruled columns. Name, address, usual order, notes. Iris turned the pages carefully, scanning the entries. Most were local addresses, the order's variations on tea and cake. But then, on a page dated 1943, she found it. James Fletcher, C.O. the Railway Station Post Office, Bath. Usual order, black tea, no sugar. Toast with marmalade. Notes, Tuesday mornings, 8 a.m. Temporary resident. Leaves November 15. And below it, added in different ink, as if entered later, Violet Ashworth Fletcher, same address. Usual order, Earl Grey with lavender, lemon cake. Notes, married October 30, 1943. Name changed from Violet James. Ashworth, Cecily gasped. You said Alina Ashworth was your patron, the one whose collection you're cataloging. Yes, but she would have been born much later than this. This must be. Iris's mind raced through the genealogy. This could be Alina's grandmother. Violet James, who became Violet Fletcher, then somehow became Violet Ashworth. So Gran knew her. They were the same age, must have been friends. That would make sense. Gran would have been in her early 20s in 1943. Iris pulled out her phone and made a note. I need to check the Ashworth family papers. If Violet was Alina's grandmother, there should be records, photographs, maybe even letters. But what does this have to do with the notes appearing now? I don't know. But look at this. The note said between pages 47 and 48 of the guest book. Something waits that was always meant to be found. She picked up the 1943 guest book again and opened it to page 47. The page was dated October 28, 1943. Regular entries, names, comments, nothing unusual. She turned to page 48. October 31, 1943. Also normal, but when she held the book up to the light, she could see that the binding was slightly thicker between these pages. Something had been inserted there. Do you have a letter opener? She asked. Cecily produced one from a desk drawer, and Iris carefully worked it between the pages. They had been glued together at the edges, expertly, so that the alteration wasn't visible unless you were looking for it. Inside the hidden pocket were 3 items: a wedding announcement clipped from a newspaper, Fletcher James. The marriage took place quietly on Saturday, October 30, 1943, at Bath Abbey, between Mr. James Fletcher and Miss Violet James. Owing to wartime restrictions, no reception was held. A pressed violet, still vivid purple after all these years, its stem tied with a scrap of white ribbon and a small brass key tarnished with age, with a paper tag attached. On the tag, written in that now familiar hand, Platform 3, Locker 27. The railway station, Iris said. That's where he collected his post. And look where steam once rose and goodbyes were whispered. Look for the bench that remembers. Another note mentioned the station. Cecily was staring at the pressed flower. My grandmother's name was Violet James before she married my grandfather. But I thought she married Arthur Wells, not someone named Fletcher. I have her marriage certificate at home. I'm sure of it. Could she have been married twice? Maybe, but I never heard anything about a first husband. And why would she hide all of this? Iris gathered the items carefully. I think we need to follow this trail to the end before we can understand. The next clue is at the railway station. Shall we? Bath Spa Railway Station still retained much of its Victorian grandeur, though modern additions and crowds of commuters had overlaid the historical architecture. Iris and Cecily stood in the main concourse, looking around uncertainly. Locker 27, platform 3, Cecily said. But these old lockers don't exist anymore, do they? They must have been removed decades ago. Iris approached the information desk, where a young man in a railway uniform was helping an elderly woman with train times. When he was free, she smiled at him. "Excuse me, I know this might sound odd, but I'm doing some historical research about the station. Are there any old left luggage lockers still on platform 3? Or any that have been preserved?" The young man looked bemused. Left luggage lockers. Those were phased out for security reasons ages ago. But he paused, thinking. There's a section of the old platform 3 that's been closed off for years. They keep talking about renovating it, but never seem to get around to it. Some old infrastructure back there. You might try asking Mr. Pearson. He's been the station manager for 30 years. Knows everything about this place. His office is down that corridor, past the ticket machines. Mr. Pearson turned out to be a tall man in his 60s, with a passion for railway history that became immediately apparent when Iris explained what she was looking for. The old lockers. Yes, they're still there, or some of them anyway. That whole section is a bit of a time capsule, really. We've been meaning to do something with it, but there's never budget. You want to see them. If it's possible, follow me. He led them through a staff-only door, down a corridor lined with notices and timetables, and out onto a section of platform that was clearly no longer in use. A temporary barrier blocked it from the active platform, and the surface was dusty. The old waiting room boarded up. "Here we are," Mr. Pearson said, producing a large ring of keys and unlocking a door. This was the old left luggage room. We haven't opened it in years. The room smelled of old metal and dust. Along one wall stood a row of green-painted lockers, each with a number stenciled on its door. Iris felt her heart race as she counted along. 23, 24, 25, 26, 27. The locker was there, its paint peeling, its lock rusted. "Do you have a key for these?" Cecily asked. "Afraid not. Those locks are original, from the 40s or 50s. We'd have to get a locksmith." Mr. Pearson looked apologetic. "Actually," Iris said, pulling out the brass key they'd found in the guest book, "I might have one." She tried the key in the lock. It took some wiggling. The mechanism was stiff with age, but after a moment, she felt it turn. The door opened with a creak. Inside was a metal box, about the size of a shoebox, covered in dust. "Well, I'll be," Mr. Pearson breathed. "Someone left that there 80 years ago." "It seems so." Iris lifted the box carefully. It was heavier than she expected. "May I take this? It's part of a family history we're researching." "I don't see why not." "Can't imagine the railway has any claim on it after all this time. Just sign here that you've taken it for our records." After completing the paperwork, they found a bench on the modern part of the platform. Trains came and went. Announcements echoed. People hurried past. But Iris and Cecily sat in their own bubble of anticipation, the metal box between them. Cecily opened it. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth that had kept them protected from moisture, were a bundle of letters tied with a lavender ribbon, a small leather journal, its cover embossed with the initials VJ, 2 identity cards, both issued in 1942. One for James Fletcher, Captain, showing a man in military uniform with serious eyes. One for Violet James, showing a young woman with dark hair and a gentle smile, unmistakably the same woman from the cafe photographs. A folded document that, when opened, proved to be a marriage certificate for James Fletcher and Violet James, dated October 30, 1943, and at the bottom, a photograph of a young couple on their wedding day. The man was in uniform, the woman in a simple dress with a small hat and a corsage of violets. They stood outside Bath Abbey, and the expression on their faces was one of pure, precarious joy, the happiness of people who know their time might be short. "That's not the man my grandmother married," Cecily said quietly. "My grandfather was Arthur Wells. I have their wedding photo at home. They married in 1946. This is someone else." Iris opened the journal carefully. The pages were covered in the handwriting they now knew so well, the same script as all the notes. The first entry was dated September 8, 1942. "Today I met him. I was buying lavender at the Tuesday market. I always buy fresh flowers for the tea room. It's one of my small pleasures in these grim times. He was at the next stall, buying vegetables, and our hands reached for the last bunch of lavender at the same moment. "You take it," he said. "It suits you better than it would suit me. Such a small thing." But something in his smile, in the way he tipped his hat as he walked away, made me think about him for the rest of the day. Iris looked at Cecily. "We should read these somewhere more comfortable. Shall we go back to the cafe?" Back at the Lavender Café, with the afternoon rain intensifying outside, and the lamps lit against the gathering dusk, Iris and Cecily settled at a corner table with the contents of the box spread before them. Cecily had closed the cafe early, putting up a sign that said "Family Emergency, reopening tomorrow." They made a pot of tea, lavender Earl Grey, naturally, and Iris began to read the journal aloud. The story that emerged was both ordinary and extraordinary. The kind of wartime romance that must have been repeated in variations across Britain during those uncertain years. Violet James, 22 years old in 1942, helped her mother run the Violet Tea Room. Her father had died when she was young, and she had a younger sister, Cecily, who was 14 and still in school. They lived in the flat above the cafe, the same rooms where boxes of records were now stored. James Fletcher was a captain in the Royal Engineers, stationed temporarily in Bath, while his unit underwent training for overseas deployment. He was 26, from Yorkshire, and had been a civil engineer before the war. His parents were dead, and he had no siblings. He was, as Violet wrote, wonderfully and terribly alone. They met by chance at the market, but after that, chance became intention. He started coming to the tea room every Tuesday morning. They talked carefully at first, then with increasing openness. He told her about the bridges he'd built before the war, the precision of mathematics made physical. She told him about her love of poetry, of how she saw beauty in small things, the way light fell through steam, the pattern of tea leaves, the precise purple of lavender flowers. October 15, 1942, Iris read. He asked me today if I would wait for him. Not to marry him. He was very careful about that. He said he had no right to ask me to tie myself to someone who might not come back. But he wanted to know if I would write to him, if he could write to me, if I could be the thought he carried with him, wherever they send him. I told him yes. Of course, yes. How could I say anything else? I've been waiting for him since the moment we met, though I didn't know it then. The entries continued through the autumn and winter of 1942. His letters arrived regularly. He'd been sent to North Africa. Hers went to him via the Forces Post. The journal became a record of a relationship sustained entirely through words on paper and memory. March 1943. He's been gone 5 months. Sometimes I can't quite picture his face anymore, and that terrifies me. I hold on to our conversations like talismans. I've kept every letter, every envelope. They smell of dust and sun and something foreign. Cecily teases me that I'm mooning about. Mother worries that I'm investing too much hope in someone who might not return, or who might return changed, or who might return to realize that what we had was just a wartime fancy. But I know better. Some things are true regardless of circumstances. She named her sister after you, Iris said to Cecily. Or you were named after her. I never knew I had a great aunt, Cecily. My mother never mentioned her. Cecily's eyes were wet. What happened to her? Let's keep reading. The journal continued through the summer of 1943. James's letters became less frequent as his unit moved deeper into combat zones. Violet's entries grew more anxious, but also more determined. She started pressing flowers from the market, tucking them into her journal: lavender, violets, rosemary. Then, in September 1943, September 20, a miracle. He came back. He's alive. They've given his unit 2 weeks of leave before they ship out again, this time to the continent, he thinks, preparing for what everyone knows is coming. He came straight to the tea room from the station, still in his dusty uniform, looking thinner and older, and exactly as I remembered. He didn't say anything. Neither did I. We just looked at each other across the tables and knew. He has 1 week left in Bath. 7 days. September 25. We've spent every possible moment together, walking by the river, sitting in the Abbey gardens, talking and talking, and sometimes just being silent together. Mother has been kind. She lets me take long breaks from the tea room. She sees what's happening and doesn't try to stop it. He asked me again today, properly this time, got down on one knee in the parade gardens, right in front of everyone. I have no ring, no prospects, no certainty of a future, he said. But I have love, and I have 2 days. Will you marry me? I said yes. Of course, yes. October 1, 1943. We married this morning at Bath Abbey. The ceremony was short. There was no time for bands, so we got a special license. Only Mother and Cecily were there, and 2 strangers from the street who served as witnesses. I wore my best dress and carried violets. He wore his uniform. We had no rings. We'll get them after the war, if there is an after. We signed the register as husband and wife, James and Violet Fletcher. Strange to see my new name. Strange and wonderful and terrifying. We have 1 night. Tomorrow he leaves. The entries after that became spare, each one a meditation on absence and hope. October 2, 1943. He's gone. The flat feels empty. The cafe feels empty. I feel empty, but also full of him, of us, of everything we said to each other in those few hours we had alone. I'm pregnant. I'm sure of it. It's too early to know for certain, but I know. I carry him with me now, always. November 1943. I'm definitely pregnant. Mother knows. We haven't told Cecily yet. She's too young to understand. And besides, what if something goes wrong? The war makes everything uncertain. I've had 2 letters from James. He doesn't know yet. I'll tell him when he writes next, when I'm further along, and sure the baby will hold. December 1943. The letter arrived this morning. Missing in action, they said. Missing. Not dead, not captured, just missing. Gone somewhere between one place and another, swallowed by the war. I don't believe it. I won't. He's alive. He has to be. We're connected. I would feel it if he were gone, surely. I would know. But weeks pass, and there's no word. No correction to the report. No news. No letters. Just silence where his words used to be. Iris paused. The entries became more fragmented, the handwriting occasionally shaky. January 1944. Mother is worried about me. I'm 5 months pregnant now, obviously showing, and still in mourning for someone who isn't confirmed dead. People are starting to talk. An officer's widow would receive some sympathy, but a woman whose husband is simply missing, who might have left her, who might have been lying about everything. I don't care what they say, but I care about the baby. I care about giving this child the best life possible. February 1944. Arthur Wells has asked me to marry him. He's a good man, older than me, a solicitor who was declared unfit for military service due to a heart condition. He knew James slightly. They were at school together years ago. He knows I'm pregnant with another man's child. He says he'll give the baby his name, provide for us. Ask nothing I'm not willing to give. In return, he gets a wife who will never love him as she loved someone else, but who will be grateful and loyal and kind. Mother thinks I should accept. What else is there? I can't raise a child alone, not with the stigma. The tea room is barely surviving as it is, but accepting means letting go of James, means admitting he's not coming back. The final entry was dated March 15, 1944. I'm going to do it. I'm going to marry Arthur. The baby is due in June. We need to marry soon, before the birth, so the child can be legitimate. But I can't erase James. I won't. I'm writing down everything, our whole story, and I'm hiding it. Someday, when enough time has passed, when the war is over and the wounds aren't so raw, I'll tell Cecily everything. She deserves to know. She loved him too. In her way, she saw how happy he made me. I'll leave a trail for her to follow. Clues hidden in places only she would think to look. And if something happens to me before I can tell her directly, if I die in childbirth or the bombs finally reach us, at least the truth will be there, waiting to be found. James Fletcher existed. He loved me, and I loved him. We had one perfect week, and from it came a child who will carry his blood, even if she bears another man's name. I will not forget. This is my promise. I will not forget. The journal ended there. Iris closed it gently. The cafe was silent, except for the soft patter of rain and the ticking of an old clock on the wall. The baby, Cecily said finally. That was my mother, wasn't it? She was born a leaner Fletcher, but became a leaner Wells when Violet married Arthur. It seems so. And your mother must have given you the family name, Cecily, after Violet's sister. But my mother never knew any of this. She died thinking Arthur Wells was her father. Gran never told her. Maybe she meant to, but never found the right time. Or maybe Iris gestured to the letters they hadn't yet read. Maybe something prevented her. Cecily reached for the bundle of letters. There were perhaps 20 of them, all addressed to Violet James at the Violet Tea Room, all postmarked from various places in North Africa and Italy during 1942 and 1943. They were James's letters, the ones Violet had treasured. But beneath them was one more letter different from the rest. It was addressed to Cecily James, care of the Violet Tea Room, and postmarked Bath, 1945. This is for my great aunt, Cecily said, puzzled. Why would it be in this box? Open it. The letter inside was from Violet, written in the same hand, but shakier now, less controlled. My dearest sister, if you're reading this, I'm gone. Pneumonia took me more quickly than anyone expected. I was well on Monday. And now it's Friday, and they tell me I probably won't see Sunday. I'm writing to you instead of to Alina because she's only 6 months old. Someday, she'll be old enough to understand. But by then, I fear the story will have faded, become just another casualty of the war. So I'm giving it to you. The whole truth, all the pieces I've been hiding. It's all in the box at the station. The locker key is in my jewelry box, in the little velvet bag with the loose earring. Go there, read everything, and then decide, do we tell Alina, or do we let her grow up believing Arthur is her father? Arthur has been good to us both. He loves Alina as if she were his own. Part of me thinks it would be cruelest to tell her the truth, to make her mourn a father she never knew. But another part of me wants her to know that she came from love. Real, true, desperate love, that she was wanted, planned for, treasured even before she was born. I leave it to you. You were always the practical one, the sensible one. You'll know what's right. All my love. Your sister, Violet. P.S. If you do tell her someday, tell her about the lavender. Tell her that's why I named her a leaner. It means light, and lavender means devotion. Tell her she was born from both. She died, Cecily whispered. Gran died in 1945. That's why she never told the story. She meant to leave the clues for her sister, but something happened, Iris finished. The young Cecily never found the letter, or never found the key, or perhaps she did find it, but decided not to tell Alina. Maybe she thought it would hurt too much. So Alina, my mother, never knew. No, but now someone else knows the story and is trying to bring it to light. Someone who's been leaving notes in the cafe, who knows about all the hiding places, who wants the truth to be found. But who could possibly know all of this? Iris thought for a moment, then stood and approached the wall of photographs. She studied each one carefully, paying special attention to the details she hadn't noticed before. Here, she said finally, pointing to a photograph from 1944. It showed Violet, visibly pregnant, standing outside the tea room with another woman beside her. The second woman was older, perhaps 40, with a kind face. She had her arm around Violet's shoulders in a protective gesture. Who's that with Gran? I don't know, but look, she's holding something. Iris peered closer. It's a book, and there's writing on the spine, though I can't make it out in the photograph. She took out her phone and snapped a picture of the photograph, then zoomed in on the book spine. The letters resolved. Commonplace book. A commonplace book, Iris said slowly. That's a kind of journal where people collect quotes, recipes, bits of poetry, personal miscellanies. And look, one of the notes we found said the recipe was never about cake. What if there are recipes in the commonplace book, but they're actually coded messages? But we don't have any commonplace book. I've never seen one among Gran's things. Not here, but remember, I'm cataloging the Ashworth collection. Alina Ashworth was Violet's daughter. What if the book ended up there among Alina's possessions? The Ashworth estate sat on the outskirts of Bath, a Georgian manor house surrounded by extensive gardens that had once been magnificent, but now showed signs of genteel neglect. Iris had been given a key and full access to the library, which occupied the ground floor of the West Wing. She arrived there the next morning with Cecily in tow, both of them animated by the previous day's discoveries and the promise of more to come. The The library was exactly the kind of place Iris loved. Floor-to-ceiling shelves, tall windows overlooking the gardens, rolling ladders, and that particular smell of old books, leather, paper, dust, and time. She'd been working here for a week, beginning the long process of cataloging the collection. But she'd only scratched the surface. "We're looking for a commonplace book," she told Cecily. "Possibly from the 1940s, possibly with recipes in it. It might be labeled, or it might just be a notebook among other papers." They began to search systematically. The collection was extensive, perhaps 3,000 volumes, plus boxes of papers, photographs, and personal effects that Alina had accumulated over her 89 years. It was Cecily who found it, in a box labeled Mother's Papers. The commonplace book was smaller than Iris had expected, bound in faded blue cloth with marbled end papers. Inside, the pages were filled with handwriting in different styles, evidence of multiple contributors. Recipes for cakes and puddings, pressed flowers, bits of poetry copied out, household tips, prayers, everything you'd expect in such a book. But on page 47, and Iris's breath caught when she saw the page number, there was a recipe for lavender cake that seemed somehow different from the others. "Lavender Cake for Remembrance," the title read, in Violet's handwriting. 1 cup of patience, 2 cups of devotion, 1/2 cup of Tuesday mornings, a pinch of lavender from the market, 3 tablespoons of letters kept, fold in 1 cup of waiting, bake at the temperature of hope until golden, serve with memories. "It's not a real recipe," Cecily said. "No, it's a poem, a memorial." Iris turned the pages carefully. There were other recipes in the same vein, scattered throughout the book. Tea for goodbye. Steep sorrow in boiling water. Add sugar to make it bearable. Serve in the cup we shared. Drink it slowly. Remember. And biscuits for hope. Measure out the days. Add the hours you counted. Mix with tears and smiles equally. Cut into shapes that please you. These will sustain you through the winter. She wrote these after he died, Iris said softly. Or after she thought he died. They're her way of preserving the memory, processing the grief. But why hide them in code? Why not just write them plainly? Maybe she felt she couldn't. Remember, she was remarried, trying to build a new life. Maybe these were too raw, too private. Cecily was paging through the rest of the book. Near the end, tucked between pages, was a folded piece of paper, newer than the book itself. The paper crisp and white. It was another note. In the handwriting they'd come to recognize. You followed the trail faithfully. Well done. There's one more place to look, one more piece to complete the picture. Go back to the cafe, to the cellar where the old things are kept. Look for the trunk that belonged to the sister. Inside, you'll find what was meant to be said, but never was. The cellar, Iris said. You have a cellar under the cafe. Yes, but it's just storage. Old furniture, supplies, things like that. I haven't been down there in months. They drove back to the cafe in Cecily's car, both silent, wrapped in thought. The mystery was close to resolution. They could both feel it. But there was also an undercurrent of sadness. They were uncovering a tragedy, a love cut short, a life lived in compromise. The cellar beneath the Lavender Café was accessed through a door in the back room, down a flight of stone steps that spoke of the building's age. Cecily flicked on a light switch, and a bare bulb illuminated a space that was surprisingly dry and well organized. Gran set this up as proper storage, Cecily explained. She was particular about conditions, wanted to make sure nothing got damp or ruined. There were shelves of supplies, stacks of spare chairs, old kitchen equipment, and in the far corner, several trunks and boxes. That one, Cecily said, pointing to a trunk with a faded luggage tag. She went closer and read the tag aloud. C. James, 1950. Cecily James, the younger sister, your great aunt. They opened the trunk together. Inside were the expected things: old clothes, books, a few pieces of costume jewelry. But at the bottom, wrapped in tissue paper that had yellowed with age, was a large envelope. Inside the envelope were a death certificate for Violet Fletcher, née James, dated February 12, 1945. Cause of death, pneumonia. A second marriage certificate showing Arthur Wells and Violet Fletcher marrying on March 1, 1944. A birth certificate for Alina Fletcher, born June 3, 1944. Father listed as James Fletcher, deceased. Mother Violet Fletcher. An amended birth certificate issued in 1945, changing Alina Fletcher's name to Alina Wells, following her adoption by Arthur Wells. And beneath all the official documents, a letter in an elderly hand, not Violet's, but similar. This must be the younger Cecily, writing decades later. To whoever finds this, my name is Cecily James, later Cecily Marston, after I married. I'm writing this in 1995 at the age of 67. I've lived with a secret for 50 years, and I think it's time to write it down before I too am gone, and the story is lost forever. My sister Violet was the best person I knew. When she died, I was 15, old enough to understand what I'd lost, too young to know how to bear it. Mother fell apart after that. She died herself 2 years later. Arthur Wells, who had married Violet the year before she died, took custody of Eleanor, and I went to live with an aunt in Cornwall. Before Mother died, she gave me Violet's letter, the one explaining about James Fletcher, about Eleanor's real father. She also gave me the key to the railway station locker and told me there were things there I should know about, but I never went. I was too young, too overwhelmed, too scared of what I might find. And then the years passed, and it seemed too late. Arthur had raised Eleanor beautifully. She was happy. She thought of him as her father. Why disturb that? I kept the letter, kept the key, kept the knowledge to myself. When Arthur died in 1970, I thought about telling Eleanor then, but she was grieving, and she was 46 years old. How do you tell someone at that age that everything they believed about their parentage was a lie? So I stayed silent, and I've regretted it every day since. Eleanor, if you're reading this, I'm sorry. Your mother loved your father desperately. You were conceived in love and wanted with every fiber of her being. She died trying to keep you safe and provided for. That's the truth I should have told you. And to whoever else is reading this, if Eleanor never saw it, please know that my sister deserves to be remembered. She deserves to have her story told. She was brave and devoted and true, and the world should know that James Fletcher existed, that their love existed, that it mattered. The rest of the story is in the locker at the station. I paid to keep it in storage all these years, under the assumption that someday someone would need to know. With love and regret, Cecily James Marston. Oh, Cecily breathed. She kept the secret. She meant well, but she kept it, and Eleanor never knew. Until now, said a voice from the top of the stairs. Both women jumped. A figure stood in the doorway, a woman in her 70s, with silver hair and Eleanor Ashworth's kind eyes. I'm sorry to startle you, the woman said, descending the stairs carefully. The door was unlocked, and I heard voices. I'm Helen Ashworth, Eleanor's daughter. You must be Iris, the conservator. And she looked at Cecily with interest. I don't think we've met. Cecily Wells. I own the cafe upstairs. Of course, my grandmother's cafe. Helen reached the bottom of the stairs and looked at the papers spread around them. You found it then. I was wondering if you would. You've been leaving the notes, Iris said, understanding flooding through her. You're the one who created the trail. Helen nodded. May I sit? This is rather emotional. They found chairs, old ones from storage, and settled in a circle, the documents between them. Helen took a breath before beginning. My mother died 6 months ago. While going through her papers, I found a box she'd labeled to be opened after my death. Inside was Cecily Marston's letter. Apparently, it had been sent to her shortly before Cecily died in 1996, but Mother never opened it. Maybe she was afraid of what it would say. Maybe she just forgot about it. She was in her 90s by then, and her memory was starting to fail. But I opened it, and when I read the story, I felt cheated somehow. Mother had deserved to know. She spent her whole life thinking she was one person, when really she was someone else. The daughter of a war hero, not a provincial solicitor. The child of a grand passion, not a marriage of convenience. I wanted to honor that truth, but I also wanted to do it in a way that felt right, not just announcing it, but letting the story unfold as Violet had intended, through clues and discovery. So I started researching. I went to the railway station and found the locker still existed. I gathered all the pieces, and then I started leaving notes. But how? Cecily asked. How did you put them in the teacups without anyone seeing? Helen smiled slightly. I've been coming to your cafe for months, Cecily. Every Tuesday morning, just like James Fletcher used to. I sit in the corner, order tea, and wait. When you're busy, when everyone's distracted, I add a note to a cup before you serve it to someone. Sometimes, I add one to a cup already on a table, if the person gets up to use the restroom or look at the bookshelf. It's surprisingly easy when you're a 70-year-old woman. People don't really see you, don't suspect you. But why involve strangers? Why not just tell me directly? Cecily looked bewildered. Because I wanted the story to feel alive again, the way it was when Violet was creating it. She left a trail for her sister to follow. I left a trail for anyone to follow who cared enough to pay attention. And I thought, she looked at Iris. I thought maybe someone with the right skills would find it. Someone who understood old papers and mysteries. Someone who could help me tell it properly. The Ashworth collection, Iris said slowly. You specifically requested a conservator to catalog it. You wanted someone who would find the commonplace book. Yes, I knew it was there. I'd found it among Mother's things. But I wanted it to be discovered in the natural course of work, to fit into the larger story. I've been orchestrating this whole thing, leaving breadcrumbs for weeks, hoping someone would follow them to the end. Helen's eyes were wet. I wanted my grandmother to be known, not just as Aliner's mother or Arthur's wife, but as herself, as Violet Fletcher, who loved and lost and carried on. Iris gathered the papers carefully. This is an incredible story, and you're right, it deserves to be told. But what do you want to do with it now? It's your family's history. I want to share it with Cecily first, because we're family, even if we didn't know it. My grandmother was named after your great aunt. That connects us. Helen looked at Cecily with warmth. And then I want to create something in the cafe. A memorial, maybe, or a display. something that tells Violet's story and honors what she and James had. Cecily was crying now, tears running down her face unchecked. I'd like that. I'd like that very much. Gran deserves to be remembered as more than just the woman who ran the tea room. She was brave. She loved fiercely. She made an impossible choice and lived with it. There's one more thing, Helen said, pulling a small box from her pocket. I found this in the railway locker, in a separate envelope marked for a leaner. Mother never saw it, but I think she would want Aliner's namesake to have it now. She handed the box to Cecily. Inside, nestled in faded velvet, was a wedding ring, a simple gold band with an inscription inside. VF and JF, October 1943. Always. Violet's wedding ring, Iris breathed. The one James couldn't give her at the time, because there was no time to buy rings. He must have sent it later, before he died. Actually, Helen said softly, he didn't die. That's the last part of the story, the part I only discovered last week. Helen pulled out her phone and opened a document. After I found all of Violet's papers, I started researching James Fletcher. I wanted to know more about him, where he came from, what happened to him. The records said missing in action in December 1943, presumed killed. But I'm a retired librarian, and I know how to dig through archives. I found his military record, and then I found something else, a newspaper article from 1946, from a small paper in Yorkshire. She turned the phone so Iris and Cecily could read the screen. The article was brief, tucked in a corner of the page. Local man returns after being presumed dead. Captain James Fletcher, 30, of Halifax, has returned home after more than 2 years as a prisoner of war in Germany. Captain Fletcher, a civil engineer who served with the Royal Engineers, was reported missing in action in December 1943 after his unit was ambushed near Cassino, Italy. He was held in a POW camp near Munich until liberation by Allied forces in May 1945. Captain Fletcher reports that he was unable to communicate with family or friends during his captivity due to camp conditions. He is recovering from his ordeal and plans to resume his engineering career. I'm grateful to be alive, he told our reporter. There were many who weren't as fortunate. Cecily stared at the screen. He lived. He came back. But too late, Iris said quietly. Violet died in February 1945. He was liberated in May. Just 3 months. I kept researching, Helen said. I found his death certificate. He died in 1987 at the age of 71 in Halifax. Never married. Worked as an engineer for 40 years. There were obituaries, brief ones. James Fletcher, retired civil engineer, survived by no immediate family. Did he know? Cecily asked urgently. Did he know about Alina? Did he try to find Violet? I think he must have tried. I found one more thing. Helen showed them another document, a letter, addressed to the Violet Tea Room, dated August 1946. Dear Mrs. James, I hope this letter finds you well. I am writing to inquire about your daughter, Violet James, whom I knew during my stationing in Bath in 1940 to 1943. We were briefly married before my deployment. I have recently returned from prisoner of war captivity and learned that Violet was reported deceased in 1945. I was devastated to receive this news. If it is not too painful for you, I would be grateful to know the circumstances of her death and whether she left any message for me. I understand this letter may come as a shock. If you prefer not to respond, I will understand. But I needed to try to reach her one last time. With deepest condolences and respect, James Fletcher. He wrote to her mother, Iris said. Violet's mother would have received this in 1946. She would have known he was alive. What happened? Cecily demanded. Did she write back? Did she tell him about Alina? I don't know, Helen admitted. I found no record of a response. Violet's mother died in 1947. Maybe she was too ill or too grief-stricken to deal with it. Or maybe she did write back and the correspondence was lost. Or maybe she paused. Maybe she thought it was kinder not to tell him. Alina had been adopted by Arthur Wells by that point. She had a stable home, a father who loved her. Maybe Violet's mother thought telling James would only cause more pain. So he lived out his life, never knowing he had a daughter, Cecily said, her voice breaking. Never knowing that Alina existed, that part of Violet survived. Unless, Iris said slowly, he found out somehow. Is there any way to trace whether he ever came back to Bath? Whether he tried to find more information? Helen shook her head. I've looked. There's no evidence he ever returned. The last reference I can find to him in connection with Bath is that letter from 1946. After that, he seems to have stayed in Yorkshire, working, living a quiet life. They sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of the tragedy settling over them. Two people who loved each other, separated by war, by death, by circumstance. A child who never knew her real father. A man who never knew he had a daughter. But we know now, Cecily said finally. We can tell the story. We can make sure they're remembered together. That's why I did all this, Helen said. The notes, the trail, the mystery. I wanted people to engage with the story, to care about it. Not just read it in a display case, but feel it, follow it, discover it piece by piece the way Violet intended. I wanted the story to be alive again. Iris stood, gathering the papers carefully. I think we should compile everything into an archive. All the letters, the documents, the photographs. I can help with the conservation and organization. And then we can create a proper memorial in the cafe. And a book, Helen added. A small book that tells their story. We could print it, make copies available for people to read. I've already started writing it, actually. That's why I knew I needed everything gathered. I wanted to do it justice. What about James's family? Cecily asked. Does he have any relatives who should know about this? I've traced his family tree as far as I can. He was an only child, and his parents died before the war. There were some cousins, but the line seems to have died out. As far as I can tell, Eleanor and her descendants, including me, are James Fletcher's only living relatives. Then we're your family, Cecily said impulsively. We're connected through them, through Violet and Cecily, through the cafe, through this story. Helen smiled, tears on her cheeks. I'd like that very much. Over the next month, the three women worked together to create something beautiful from the fragments of the past. Iris used her conservation skills to carefully preserve and archive all the documents, the letters, the journal, the photographs, the commonplace book. She created acid-free housings for everything, compiled a catalog, and arranged for digital copies to be made so the materials could be shared without damaging the originals. Helen finished writing the book. She called it Lavender and Remembrance, a wartime love story. It told the story of Violet and James in careful detail, with photographs and reproductions of key documents. She had it printed in a small edition, just 200 copies, with a beautiful cover showing the photograph of their wedding day. Cecily transformed a corner of the cafe. She had the walls painted a soft lavender and installed display cases where the documents and photographs could be shown in rotation, carefully lit and protected. She commissioned a local artist to create a painted timeline on one wall, showing the key dates of Violet and James's story. And in the center of the display, in a place of honor, she placed two photographs side by side. Violet on her wedding day, holding her violets, smiling her cautious, hopeful smile, and James in his uniform, the photograph from his identity card, looking serious and kind. Beneath the photographs, Cecily placed a small brass plaque. Violet James Fletcher, 1921, 945. James Fletcher, 1987. Married October 30, 1943. Separated by war, reunited in memory. The memorial opened on a Tuesday in November, exactly 100 years after Violet and James had met at the lavender stall in the Tuesday market. cafe was full regular customers, local historians, university staff who'd heard about the project, journalists from the Bath Chronicle, and dozens of people who'd found mysterious notes in their teacups over the past months and wanted to know the full story. Iris stood near the back, watching as Helen gave a short speech about her grandmother and the quest to honor her memory. Cecily added her own remarks, talking about the cafe's history and her pride in being connected to this story. Several of the people who'd found notes came forward to share their experiences, describing how they'd felt when they discovered the mysterious messages. It felt like the past was reaching out, one woman said. Like someone was saying, "I was here. I mattered. Remember me." That was exactly it, Iris thought. That was what the whole project had been about, making sure Violet and James were remembered, that their brief time together wasn't lost to history. After the formal presentations, people moved through the cafe, examining the displays, reading excerpts from the book, talking quietly among themselves. Iris found herself in front of the photographs again, studying Violet's face. "She looks like a leaner," Helen said, appearing at her elbow. "My mother. I never noticed before, but in this photo you can see it. The shape of the eyes, the smile, and a leaner looked like you," Iris observed. "So, in a way, you're carrying both of them forward, Violet and James. Their faces, their story. That's a lovely thought." Helen was quiet for a moment. "Do you think we did right, bringing all this to light? Or should we have let it stay buried?" Iris considered. "I think stories want to be told, and people deserve to be remembered for who they really were, not just the surface version. Violet was more than just a woman who ran a tea room. James was more than just a name on a casualty list. They had this extraordinary connection, this love that transcended impossible circumstances. That deserves to be known. My mother would have wanted to know," Helen said firmly. "I'm sure of it. She would have been proud to be James Fletcher's daughter." They stood together in comfortable silence, honoring the people in the photographs. Two people who'd had such a brief time together, but whose love had rippled forward through generations, creating connections and stories. And this moment, right now, when strangers gathered to remember them, 3 months later, on a cold February afternoon, Iris returned to the Lavender Café. She'd finished cataloging the Ashworth collection and was preparing to move on to her next project. But she wanted to see the memorial one more time, to say a proper goodbye to the story that had consumed her autumn. The cafe was quiet, just a handful of customers seeking refuge from the winter chill. Cecily brought her tea without asking. Lavender Earl Grey, naturally, with a slice of lemon cake. "How's it been?" Iris asked, gesturing to the memorial corner. "Wonderful. We've had visitors from all over, people who read about it in the papers or saw the story online. The book has sold out twice. We're on our third printing. And people keep bringing flowers, lavender, violets, whatever they can find in winter. I set them out on the table below the photographs. Indeed, there was a small vase of purple statice and white chrysanthemums on the table. Simple, but lovely. And the notes?" Iris asked with a smile. "Any more mysterious messages appearing?" Cecily laughed. "No, thank goodness. Helen achieved what she wanted. The story is out there now. No need for more breadcrumbs. Though I have to admit, there was something magical about those weeks when it was happening. The sense of mystery, of the past being alive. It's still alive," Iris said, "in a different way. You've made sure of that." They sat together for a while, drinking tea and watching the winter light fade outside the windows. Iris thought about all the stories hidden in objects, in documents, in places, waiting for someone to pay attention, to follow the clues, to care enough to piece together the truth. She thought about Violet, writing her journal in the uncertain years of the war, preserving her love in words, because that was all she could do. She thought about James, trying to find his way back to her, too late. She thought about Alina, living her whole life not knowing the extraordinary story of her origins. And she thought about Helen, determined to honor her grandmother by bringing that story to light. "Thank you," Cecily said suddenly, "for following the trail, for caring about the story. Helen and I couldn't have done this without you." "It was my pleasure," Iris said honestly. "This is what I love about my work, not just preserving objects, but preserving the stories they contain, making sure the past isn't lost." She finished her tea and stood to leave. At the door, she paused and looked back at the memorial corner. The photographs gazed out at the cafe, Violet and James, forever young, forever hopeful, forever separated, and forever together, where lavender blooms in window boxes, and memories steep like afternoon tea. The first note had led her here, to this story, to this moment. She was grateful for it. As she stepped out into the February cold, pulling her coat tight against the wind, she thought about all the other stories still waiting to be found. All the notes left in teacups, the letters hidden in photograph frames, the journals tucked in railway lockers. The world was full of mysteries, if you knew how to look. And somewhere, she was certain, another story was waiting for someone with curiosity and patience and care to follow its trail. She smiled and turned toward home, already wondering what she would discover next. Lavender for devotion, violets for faithfulness, and tea for the comfort of small rituals, of moments shared, of memories steeped in the everyday magic of paying attention. Sleep well, dear listener, and remember, the past is never truly lost. It waits in the objects we keep, the stories we tell, the care we take to remember. Good night.